Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the TrendMiner R&D webinar. This webinar today will be going to explain a little bit of how we're organized in the R&D department at TrendMiner. We'll also talk about technologies that we use and what the teams look like. Very important, I think. Before we get started, I would like to highlight some practical points. You're participating in a webinar in listen-only mode. That means we cannot hear you. If you have a question, please use the question box in the control panel to enter your questions. We'll try and answer as many questions as possible at the end of the webinar. If we run out of time or we are unable to answer your question for some reason, we will get back to you via email afterwards. Another point I would like to make is that all of you attending the webinar today will receive an email probably later this week with a link to the recorded version of the webinar. Finally, I think there should be a download available with the webinar. If you're unable to find it, let us know. It's a download with some vacancies we have at the company. In case you're interested. So with that being clear, I would like to basically go to presenting the team for today's webinar. Let's see if I can go to the next slide here. So I'm Thomas. I'm the CTO and co-founder of the company. But as you see on this slide, we have selected a slightly bigger team. It will not just be me presenting slides. I think that's very important because the team is a crucial factor to success. So it's important we give you a good understanding of the various roles, responsibilities in the team here. So we'll be participating. Rob will be participating. He's a product manager at TrendMiner. We'll talk about the product, the process, also in the product department, what the product team is using, the tools they're using. Nicky will be participating. He's the chief architect. He will show some technologies in our stack and also discuss some of the, let's say, the main characteristics of the architecture of the platform. And then we have Gert. Gert is a UX expert. We have Marina, which is a QA engineer on the team. Vincent, DevOps engineer. We have Gavi, which is a technical lead on Team Turing in the R&D department. And we have Gijs, which is an R&D engineer in the true sense of the word, to give you a very broad picture of different roles and responsibilities. So with that, I'd like to ask Gert, Marina, Vincent, Gavi, and Gijs, can you maybe switch on the camera for a moment for a short Q&A so I can ask you a couple questions about what it is that you're doing. Hello, guys. Hello, Marina. So maybe let's start with you, Gavi. Can you explain a bit what team you're on and what your role is on that team? Or sorry, what the role of the team is. Maybe let's start there. We cannot hear you.
Hello?
Yes, that's better.
Right, okay, sorry about that. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Javi. I work in Team Turing, as Thomas introduced. The team I work in is mostly responsible for the time series analytics part of the product. So we develop a platform that allows the user to run queries on the time series data they have. And we're responsible for three main areas inside the product. One of them is making sure the data from the customer can be indexed in TrendMiner, so we can query it as fast as we can and produce results as fast as possible. On top of this layer, on top of the data, we run the algorithms. So we have a few different algorithms to help the user analyze and study their data. So that's the second main responsibility from the team. And together with this, we also try to offer one step more, which is trying to alert the user when something goes wrong. So one thing is trying to study the data they have, but we also want to try to alert them when something goes out of the norm. So that will be a bit the context in which Team Turing operates.
All right. And what is your job on the team? And maybe also what do you like about your job most?
Sure. So my role in the team is the technical lead. So I'm a software engineer, the same as my other colleagues. We are a cross-functional team, but my role is a bit of a mix between an engineer and then the technical lead role. And the technical lead part actually comes along to try to help our product owner with the technical responsibilities the team needs to follow. The product owner will be focused mostly on unlocking the value and what is the functionality that needs to be written on our services to satisfy our customers. Together with that, of course, there's also the maintenance and the technical stream of work that we need to do. So my role as a technical lead is to make sure the architecture vision percolates through to the team and we can focus on the right areas and we can unlock the full benefit of our platform for future development.
Okay, thank
that's
you.
a bit the role. In terms of what I enjoy the most, I would say is actually learning. I find there is a lot of opportunities to learn, very, very interesting projects I get to work on and colleagues I can learn from. I also can collaborate with people from other departments, for example, the more purely research team. So we collaborate quite a lot and I feel like I get to learn a lot from there. So that really keeps me motivated and I appreciate it.
Okay, great, thank you. Kees, what about you? What is your role at TrendMiner? What team are you on? What's your focus today? Some stressful moments for Kees here. Kees, we cannot hear you yet. No. Maybe let's go to someone else first. Kees, are you there? Yeah, I think we can hear you now.
My mic just popped on. So hi, I'm Kees. I'm an R&D engineer at Team Mercator. And at Team Mercator, we put more stress on the R and R&D. We're actually responsible for the incubation of new algorithms, IDs, technologies within TrendMiner. My focus, so what I've been working on today, for example, I've been running some experiments enhancing our search algorithms. So we have a few ideas for improvements for search algorithms on time series. And we have implemented those as a prototype and comparing the pros and cons of the different search algorithms and drawing some conclusions there to lead future developments. So that's something I've been working on. Last week, I've also been working on a very interesting project, which is integrating Python machine learning technologies within TrendMiner. So using the machine technologies out there and use them on our data within the TrendMiner universe. So we want to put a pilot project out there in the near future, in the future release. It's a very exciting project I'm working on last week. But the current project I'm most interested in is the project we call Coffee ML. So currently, TrendMiner is focused on the is not focused on the process industry. So what characterizes the process industry is that you have data that comes in bursts. So it's not continuous. So think about an assembly line where you have welding machines putting cars together. You have short measurements, but high resolution measurements. So this is typical data of our discrete manufacturing. And to get TrendMiner in a good place for that industry, we're setting up a project where we want to mimic that kind of data. So what we want to do is we want to get a Raspberry Pi with some sensors, put them together, and put them on our coffee machine at the office, and then ingest that data via Cumulosity, an IoT platform, into TrendMiner, and then learn stuff about that data, of course. Unfortunately, the situation now just occurred, so we could not put it at the coffee machine in our office. So for now, I installed the hardware on my digicorder back at home. So we have this data at the moment live coming in from there, like the temperature, the humidity, vibrations, and so forth. And the goal actually is to start predicting based on the data what's going on in the environment. Am I watching TV or not? Is the cupboard open or not? And this seems and of course, when you map it to the coffee machine, predicting what coffee is being brewed. But the most important thing actually is when we map that back to our process industry customers, we want to predict live on their data, is the welding machine behaving correctly? Is it producing correct welds? So we want to predict contextual data. So that's a very interesting project I'm working on now. So, and what I also want to say, and I agree with Xavi on that, what's very interesting with working at TrendMiner is you learn something new every day because we're working in a stimulating environment with nice colleagues. It's very fun to work at TrendMiner.
Okay, thank you. So Vincent, maybe let's switch over to you. You can already start getting unmuted because apparently that's not trivial. Vincent, what team are you on, and what is the focus of that team?
Okay, so I am a part of Team Church, which is the team within TrendMiner, which is responsible for all of the infrastructure. So that's our main focus. But besides that, we also try to implement DevOps philosophies across all of the teams at TrendMiner.
Okay. So you're focused on DevOps. Can you say something about what that means to have a DevOps approach, at least what it means at TrendMiner, so people can understand it?
So with DevOps, we try to decrease the gap between developers and the operations team. And within TrendMiner, we try to focus on a couple of ways to do that. And the first thing is that we try to automate everything. So as soon as we're going to use something in production, we're not going to do it manually, but we're going to automate it using pipelines and whatnot. But it needs to be automated so it can be reproduced by everyone on the teams. In order to help with that, we use a couple of tools, mainly the tools that we work with in Team Church are Terraform and Ansible. So everything is infrastructure as code as well, which is very important to us. And besides that, another philosophy that we have in TrendMiner, which focuses on the DevOps philosophy, is that all the teams should manage their own projects. So that means that they are responsible for their code base, obviously, but they're also responsible for their pipelines. So in TrendMiner, the development teams also write their own pipelines. That's not that they have to do it all on their own. They can ask the help of our team, but it's the goal that everyone is involved and that the teams are really responsible for their own projects. So that's really the DevOps philosophy that we use at TrendMiner.
Okay, thank you very much. Marina, maybe let's go to you. And Rob, I think you're sharing the screen. Can you maybe unshare for a moment so we can see the full screen? Not because Marina is in the office, so it at least would show a little bit of the background would be representative of the office environment, much more representative than the room I'm in today. Anyway, Marina, your role is crucial, I think, because our product is quite complex. It's a complex platform. You're on the quality, being a QA engineer. Can you explain a bit more about your job, what you do, what tools you're using, maybe, or
yes.
and what you like about your job?
Sure. If I would need to describe it very shortly, then we are responsible, our QA engineers are responsible for the quality of product, for the quality of the processes, for the quality of documentation, specifications. The list never ends. And that's why my job is never boring. We can try different hats on, communicate with developers, with UX designers, with customer support, with different roles, and to make sure that the end result will meet the expectations of different stakeholders. And the tools that we are using, in our team, we have their freedom to experiment. We can try different tools out. We can do a proof of concept and implement it in our everyday life if it proves to be efficient and gives us a value. Right now, we are using Cucumber to write end-to-end tests together with Protractor and Cypress in some teams, and also GBehave to write integration API tests.
Okay, thank you. And maybe a last question, can you maybe turn your laptop a little bit so people can get an even better impression of what the office looks like, more or less? You see lots of whiteboards. We like to...
our stand-up corner of one of the teams.
Yeah. And then you see the different spaces. Each team has its own space in the R&D section of the office. You see a walking path, so you can never get lost. All kinds of good features. No, we're quite happy with where we're located. Thanks. Well, thanks all of you. Well, no, Gert, I forgot about Gert. Gert, let's move over to you. You're the UX expert. Can you explain what that means, being a UX expert at TrendMiner, and how we incorporate UX in our activities, maybe?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right.
Yes.
So yeah, as a UX UI engineer, I'm mainly working on like user flows and finding like the optimal user experience or patterns more or less for our applications, and I will translate those to form like an easy to work with interface. Because TrendMiner focuses on self-service analytics, the interface should be optimized in a way that it's feasible for many kind of users across different industries. So it becomes self-explanatory for them. But getting there is yeah, it's through collaboration with these clients and also our customer success team, our product team, and of course our developers, who all aim to get the best result shipped to the customer. So that's about it.
Okay, thank you. I think we will wrap up here. If you have more questions for well, any one of these people here, you can enter them in the question box. Now maybe let's move to the next slides, because obviously the team is bigger than the people that we have on the call here today. So if we move over to the next slide, you see some more people on our team. Oh, sorry. Let's go back one. So yeah, there is more people on the team that you see here. You see some people here on the terrace of our office at the Corda campus in Hasselt. This was Christmas sweater day. By the way, this is not the regular company dress code, in case you wonder. Now, with that, let's maybe move to the next slide, which I wanted to show briefly where the office locations are. The Corda campus is, for us, is the key location for R&D activities. We also have a team in Sofia, one of the 7 teams. I'll come to that in a minute. The Corda campus, I think, is a great location, not only because we have a great office there, but it's just a very vibrant ecosystem of startups and scale-ups. There's lots of interesting catering options, conference center, all of those things. It's just a very inspiring location. The other offices you see on the slides beyond Hasselt and Sofia, in particular the larger one in Houston, are focused on sales, marketing, and customer success. There are no R&D activities in those offices, but we obviously still have frequent interactions with the people that are based out of those other offices. So what I want to do next is I want to focus a bit on the vision, the mission, the vision we have for TrendMiner. I'd like to keep that rather short, but still give you a little bit of an idea of what it is that we work on and why. I was thinking how to do this, and one idea that came to mind was to basically build on a hackathon that we did some time ago, which was about a topic that we can all relate to, especially on a sunny day like today. So we did a hackathon on barbecue, and so maybe let's move to the next slide. The type of barbecue, I guess, that we would all like to have these days with friends and beers. And the idea of the hackathon was basically to apply TrendMiner analytics on data from temperature sensors out of the production process of pulled pork. That was the idea. So you see some pictures here, but on the next slide shows the setup we were using. So we connected temperature sensors in the smokers to an IoT platform, an Internet of Things platform. Data ended up in a data lake there. And by connecting TrendMiner to that data lake, we were able to investigate, examine different runs of pulled pork production and optimize the production. And this particular hackathon, we could speed up the process, the production process. We discovered that in a certain phase, and I'm really not the expert here, but in a certain phase of the production of the pulled pork, more time was spent than was actually needed. so we could reduce the length of that phase and become more efficient in producing pulled pork. Now, that's obviously a dummy or a toy example. It was a fun hackathon to do, but it does relate to what we do in reality with TrendMiner. It's all about the analytics and the industrial Internet of Things. So we help large production companies, BASF, Total, Umicore, to optimize their production by giving them access to analytics on the massive time series data they gather from the sensors in their factories. TrendMiner is being used today in more than 500 factories or plants. And for a larger factory, you can picture that it can go up to more than 100,000 sensors sometimes. So that's a lot of data to look into, and the customers are looking to exploit that data to find ways to improve their production. If you think about the pulled pork earlier, depending on circumstances, they might be looking to optimize one thing or another. If the charcoal is really expensive, for instance, then you might not care too much about the amount of pulled pork you can produce in a given time, but rather about how efficient you are. But if you're in a different circumstance, if you're on a fair and you're producing your pulled pork, then you might, if you know you can sell everything you produce, you might be very much focused on getting things produced as fast as possible. So that's the same with our customers. Some are looking to optimize energy efficiency, others are looking to minimize the amount of waste to produce, and some are focused on the pure throughput. And TrendMiner can help them achieve all of these things, or they can crack problems that help them to advance in all of these areas. So maybe let's move to the next slide. Well, the mission we're really on is to not just do analytics on time series data, but to make that advanced type of analytics. It's not just about dashboarding and visualization. It's really the advanced type of analytics available for a larger group of business users. So think about process engineers or asset experts, even operators in the control rooms, to help them to improve that production process. And in order to do that, we package machine learning, pattern recognition, machinery basically in a way that is robust and easy to use by the business experts. Because we cannot assume that they're trained as data scientists, and that is what we call self-service analytics for manufacturing. And with TrendMiner, we were really one of the first movers, if not the first mover in that space. And it's a market that I think is technologically interesting and it's growing fast, which creates nice challenges for us to tackle. Now, I don't want to elaborate too much on this. Rob will tell you something about the product, but very, very broadly, the type of analytics we address with the TrendMiner platform really range from searching in historical data, root cause detection, over monitoring, predictive functionality, but also includes contextualization and visualization. So it's a rather broad scope. There's many well, let's say different components in the platform to basically build and implement that vision. So I don't want to talk too long about what analysts think about this. I just wanted to include this slide to show you that we get recognition from analysts with respect to the vision we're building in that space. I'm not going to read this slide too much, but it's both on the level of TrendMiner and on the level of Software AG, which is the group we're part of these days, where they have other components in the IoT business unit that together make up a very strong offering. What I think is more important is the next slide, because that's really a quote, and we have many of those, but a quote that confirms that customers also think we're on the right track with that vision, and they believe in the fact in giving the power of the data to those that can interpret it, that can really use it. And again, hundreds of factories have already adopted this, and we see new ones every month, right? So I hope this gave you an idea of the mission we're on. Now I think Rob is next. He will tell you a bit more about the product, and after that, Nikki will talk about architecture and technology. So Rob, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Thomas. So yeah, I would like to give you all a short introduction into our product. and also into the process and how the product actually gets built. So first of all, TrendMiner itself. TrendMiner is a self-service analytics product, like we've mentioned before. And that self-service analytics product is there to provide insights into two types of data. Sensor data, for example, what you see on the image below, you see a wind turbine with a wattage output and an RPM output, or a small production process where you would see a heat sensor or a pressure sensor reporting data, or contextual data, data that is coming from quality systems or information about when maintenance is happening, but also weather data or the performance data of your process. And so in both these realms, we offer two products, two hubs, as we call them in our product, and that's Trend Hub and Context Hub. And both of them, they offer search and compare functionality on top of the data. And certainly in Trend Hub's case, this is we offer really the tools for regular users, the process experts that are there in the plants to really get advanced analytical tools at their disposal. And so this way they can traverse years and years of data in milliseconds even, and we offer them tools like pattern recognition or insights into influencing parameters of the process, and even give them early indicators for things that are going to happen later on. And on top of that, we also offer them tools to build machine learning models, to give recommendations about the process and the parameters that they're looking at, and even give predictions about what's going to happen in the future. And on top of that all, we often offer monitoring functionality so that people can be kept in the loop either through SMS or email about something that has happened inside of their product so that they can take action. And so on top of all of that, we have also a third hub that offer actionable dashboards, and those dashboards are available in a hub that we call Dash Hub. And so to give you a small insight in those three hubs, so this is Trend Hub, the time series analytics interface. So this is the tool where all the sensor data comes in, and you can see here we're looking at sensors, for example, about a concentration measurement and the level indicator in for example, a column, and some like comparable analytics statistics that you see here. We also have the Context Hub universe. Here you see we don't talk about time series data, but this is actually transactional data, like for example, lab samples that you see here on the second row. Lab samples that come in are just a small block in time, but actually to this small sample, a lot of parameters are attached, like for example, a few process parameters. And of course, the third one, Dash Hub. So here you can make operational dashboards that you can show up on the screen, for example, in the control room. So to actually build that product, we have a strategy where we put the customer in as our main focus. And so everywhere in the product, the user of TrendMiner can actually submit his own ideas. And that's what you see here. We have a Make-A-Wish form in the app. And in that Make-A-Wish form, they can submit their own idea, as we call it. And in the back end, the product team goes into a small cataloging tool where we can catalog all the ideas and attach them to bigger initiatives or features that we should work on in the future. And then in the end, of course, if the feature gets developed by our engineering teams, we can get back to the customer and inform them that their feature has been built and that they can start using it. For example, Here is a list of features that are actually being worked on, for example. If we look at the top one here, calculated tag nested formulas, this is one that we're releasing right now with our newest release. And you can see that 73 votes for this feature were already existing from customers. And so we get to notify 73 people that they can now access nested formulas in their calculated tags. And of course, we don't just build features as they come in. No, we plan them meticulously, and for this we create a very big product milestone map, as we call it. And here you can see how, here we plan out our different business milestones, and we actually map out all the features that are attached to those business milestones, and we can see how they connect to each other, if there are dependencies, and we can plan to which teams they need to go to get developed. And so with this small intro, I'd like to give it to Nikki, our architect, to talk a bit more about architecture and technology.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So, like Rob introduced myself, I'm Nicky. I'm the chief architect at TrendMiner, and I want to talk a little bit about my role and also especially about the technologies that we work with at TrendMiner. Can move to the next slide. So we have a bit of an architecture team, as we call it, but it's more working on the overarching level. So it's working a bit on the architecture vision and strategic direction, talking with customers, seeing what they find is important, what they are moving to, what they're thinking about for their future development and improvements in their landscapes. And then making sure that we as TrendMiner can work very well with those new and upcoming systems, new time series databases, cloud connectivity, things like that. And once we have that big picture, then the task is a little bit to also make sure that the teams understand that picture, that they know why we're doing certain things or need to do certain things, and translate that into the actual application requirements and the design. So we mostly advise and we validate designs from teams, but it's actually the engineering teams that do all the technical design collaboration. They prototype and incubate new technologies if we think there's value in doing or starting to use something new. And they also have full ownership, so they need to build it, they need to deploy it, they need to really own their pipelines from start to bottom. If you can move to the next slide. So as you saw in the product demo or explanation, we have quite a lot of different functionalities. And it also means that we don't have a small code base or a simple one binary thing we deploy. We have a lot of different components, and we're approaching it from a microservice architecture. So that means that we have a whole bunch, it's more than 20 at the moment, but it grows continuously as we evolve our product. We have a whole bunch of very small components who are really good at doing one piece of functionality of the bigger system. They interact using different things like REST APIs or streaming APIs, event-based, messaging-based. It depends a bit on the use cases and how to optimally solve a specific problem. And every team owns a certain set of those specific domains. So that's for the ownership part. They own those services. They need to make sure their APIs are designed well and then working well with other teams. And to also bridge the gap with the business is that from the product team to the technical collaboration, we try to use domain-driven designs, meaning that we try to come up with a language that the customer understands, that the product team understands, and that the development teams understand, so that when talking and then discussing about problems and solutions, everybody is using the same terminology and is really aligned on the concepts that are used within TrendMiner to solve specific problems. So some principles that we apply for that, continuous integration and continuous delivery. So we really try to keep everything as code. So both the applications, all our infrastructure, like Vincent explained from the ops team, but also our build pipelines, the definitions of that, deployment artifacts, everything is done as code as much as possible. And we apply DevOps. We are looking at flows like GitOps and ShadOps even on our Kubernetes deployments. So we try to keep up with modern processes to really enable fast and continuous integration. The domain-driven design, like I mentioned, so defining the boundaries of that and the right tool for the job. So it's mainly a microservice architecture, but there is a lot of other patterns and different things we continuously look at to see if we could apply them on our architecture to make sure that we solve a specific problem in a really good and efficient way. Move to the next slide. So high level, and it's very, very high level, of course, but we have an interesting problem to solve with our deployments at TrendMiner, in a sense that a lot of customers still deploy us on premises, meaning they have their own VM or data center that they want to run our software in. And next to that, we also have customers that want us to manage it as a software as a service platform or install it in their own cloud platforms. And to accommodate those different models, what we did is we layered our deployment separate from our applications. And taking the microservice architecture with everything and running in containers, that made it easy because we have different agent layers, as we call it, that are specifically designed. While they're both standardized on Kubernetes, one is designed for cloud deployments, one is designed for on-premise single VM deployments or edge deployments, as we call them. And we also provide virtual machine images to make that very easy for our customer to have a single-click install and upgrade scenario in all of those deployment scenarios. So you can move to the next one. Then I'll talk a little bit about our main technology stack. It's only a handful of things that we show here, but from a development point of view, most of our backend services are written in Java using Spring Boot framework. Our front-end parts are mostly using Angular and Redux libraries for state management. But there is definitely a whole bunch of other libraries, of course, that we're using there. We use Apache Ignite as a base for our computational grid or compute grid. And that's what Javi talked about, what his team is working on. That's where we actually execute all of those massive scale analytics and try to get answers back to the user within milliseconds or seconds. We use some other tools like Kubernetes, of course, like I mentioned, Prometheus, Golang for some system services, Python for the machine learning integration. But next to that, if you can move to the next slide, we're also continuously looking at what's moving in the technology world and how we can improve our setup and make it run more fast and lightweight. So we're also looking at prototyping and incubating some other and newer technologies, some things you see here like alternative frameworks like Quarkus or Micronaut, or improving our data transfer with things like Apache Arrow or gRPC. And from a deployment and operational security point of view, looking at things like service meshes to handle cross-cutting concerns better on our platform. And like I mentioned before, these things are typically picked up together with the teams who do some prototyping, share their experiences, and as we see that it brings a lot of value, then we start a trajectory to slowly introduce the technology into our stack so we can take advantage of that for future projects. And a third thing that we are heavily working and looking at continuously is actually data integration. So because we are deployed in a lot of different situations with a lot of different customers, they also have a lot of different places where their data is stored. So something that's been increasing, especially with the upcoming of the cloud and a lot of new time series solutions and IoT solutions and that cloud vendors are offering. So we are continuously investigating how can we integrate with those tools, what's a good reference architecture if we want to bring TrendMiner into the picture there, and then productizing connectivity features for those tools if we see that there is a lot of requests from customers in those areas. And that concludes the summary.
Thanks, Nicky. So with that, we reached, like say, the last part of the webinar, in which I would like to talk a little bit about the R&D process itself. So maybe let's move to the next slide. You can click one more time, because I'd like to basically talk a bit about some of the things we believe in with respect to the R&D process. So we believe in the principle that you build it, you test it, you support it, end-to-end ownership. That's also the reason why we do not work in pure front-end and back-end teams, for instance, but in teams that own a certain piece of functionality for a certain domain, like Nikki already mentioned, as a whole. We value quality and automation. That also means we write lots of automated tests, for instance. We think that's very important. We also like teams to make decisions as a team as much as possible. Of course, it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be no end responsibility for certain topics, like Nikki on the architecture side, but we like teams to make decisions as a team as much as possible. We keep feedback cycles short. I think that's also a very important principle, both within the team, within the TrendMiner organization, and also with our customers. We try to stay in touch there and have short feedback cycles. We understand that communication, although it might be difficult, it's often difficult, is crucial, and we try to give attention to that appropriately. We think it's important to factor in priorities in our work, and so we also always expect people to think about the business aspects and why they're doing certain things, what the value is of that. We try to stop starting and start finishing. That's hard sometimes. And I'm sometimes guilty of trying to initiate too many things at once. But this principle, as a guiding principle, we try to adhere to that as much as possible. And a classic, I think, the last one: we don't go home on a broken pipeline. Just to give you some impression of things that matter in the way we do R&D. Maybe on the next slide. Well, it basically explains a bit what we mean with the end-to-end ownership. We work in multidisciplinary teams, so the team defines what it's needed, it builds the feature, it's responsible for the testing, it takes responsibility of their part of the pipeline, like Vincent and Nikki were referring to, and the deployment. And finally, the team also maintains and supports what they have built. They're obviously not the first line support, but as soon as it's clear that the problem is in a certain domain or certain piece of code that a team has written, the team that has written and owns that part of the code base will be responsible for resolving that issue as well. So on the next slide, you will see that we have 7 teams like this at the moment. So it's not just one team, but it's 7 teams, 6 of which are based out of Hasselt in Belgium. Now you see the roles indicated on the top row. So teams are composed with depending on their focus, well, they all have a QA engineer and a product owner, and then depending on the needs, backend, full stack, or front end engineers, and the compilation of that. And UX and design is a bit more overarching, like Gert was explaining. Now, the teams don't work in isolation. It's important. They own a certain part of the platform, but obviously there is alignment needed. And we align in different ways. So the product owners, for instance, they have a weekly alignment on the upcoming epics or features that need to be built. So they would challenge each other in the scope they've defined there. They would also stay informed of what the other teams are going to work on, and so on. The product owners also coordinate with the product managers for the larger initiatives. That's also a part of that alignment there. Product owners also discuss the feedback from the customers very regularly with the customer success managers, a regular product tactics meeting, like we call it. So there's different alignments on the product level. There is a UX guild where multiple people throughout TrendMiner are involved in discussions around usability and UX topics. We have a front-end guild, which brings together front-end and full-stack engineers to align on the bigger picture of front-end technologies. The QA engineers, they have a testers expertise exchange where they basically interact and align with respect to the QA best practices. And then you have the architecture group that Nikki was referring to for the technical architects. And And finally, and that's the thing you see at the bottom of the slide, we have a 3-weekly engineering update and demo session where we basically, the teams present what they have built, they demo it, but we also have a town hall setting there to discuss things that matter to everyone. So on the next slide, I have an example, but I don't want to discuss the details of it, but just to make it a bit visual of one of the Kanban boards. And for many of you, this probably looks familiar with the different phases that we go through. So we believe in the importance of visibility, transparency, and also continuous flow. So we want to see things moving through these boards to show that we are making progress. Now, the last thing I want to highlight about our R&D organization today is about the customer, right? The customer is absolutely crucial. It should be in the center of our operation. So we try to keep them close, which is not always easy. If you think about a process engineer that works in a factory in Brazil, a super busy guy, how do you keep that person close? And we've built in mechanisms, and I think there's some overlap with what Rob mentioned, to basically get that feedback and close that loop in different ways with an in-app chat functionality for support, for instance, so users can directly interact when they have a question. We also organize a periodic strategic product board brainstorm with decision makers, key decision makers that are important to customers. We have a whole customer success organization, let's not forget to mention that provides a rich flow of feedback from the field. We validate designs and concepts with customers before we build them as much as we can. And we also have customers presenting their use cases on stage in our user events. And so those things are really important to make sure we build things that matter and not things that we think are nice. So to build our vision and extend our product further, we need talent, right? We need it all the time. We have a rather ambitious vision that we're building on. We're in a growth market that is evolving rapidly. We need talent, and we need it now too. So the primary roles that we're looking for are highlighted on this slide. If you fit in any of these bins, please reach out to us and do it directly. Reach out to jobs@trendminer.com, reach out via LinkedIn to TrendMiner. Don't go via an intermediate party. If you are attending this webinar and you are interested, please reach out to us directly. I think the contact details are on the next slide, but you can certainly also reach out via the information on the website of TrendMiner. So with that, I think we've reached the end of the webinar today. Obviously, we couldn't go very deep into every aspect, but I hope you found it interesting, and we did cover, like say, a lot of ground. We consider organizing additional webinars to go deeper into certain technologies or challenges. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. Now, let's see if there's any questions that we need to answer before we close the webinar. You can still enter them in the box, by the way. Let's see if there's any questions. So there is a question on how do we keep different teams up to date with the findings of others? Do we have an internal platform for knowledge referral? We don't solve that challenge today with tooling, would be my answer, although we have platforms like Confluence for an internal wiki space to create places for reference. We don't primarily solve it by tooling. I think we primarily solve it via the mechanisms that I highlighted, where we have the teams interacting on various levels. So we have the product owners of the different teams with frequent interaction, that the technical leads and technical architects have different interaction, the front-end engineers. The usability is being discussed, and so on. So we have these connection points on different levels. We have the town hall meeting, and then obviously we have some mechanisms to document. There is a question on how do the teams tackle technical debt. I think that's an interesting one. It's obviously important to keep up with technical debt. That being said, sometimes increasing the debt temporarily is inevitable, right? In the end, you have to judge the full business context, and that might include the importance of going to market fast with a given feature. The crucial thing, I think, is that you pay back what you owe in terms of debt. You don't postpone it for too long. We have different mechanisms to keep the technical debt in check, to make sure it doesn't accumulate too much. When preparing an epic, for instance, we analyze the functional scope, but also make sure we make technical choices that prevent the technical debt from growing more than needed. The technical lead in the team plays an important role also in this, to keep an inventory of the technical debt and make sure it's factored in during backlog buildings. We look at the capacity of a team also in not just capacity for feature building. We also think it's normal that you spend about 25% on what we call continuous improvement activities. And the team then decides how much is actually needed. It might be 25%, it might be less, might be more than we need to discuss. But so we think it's quite normal there. Another question is, what is TrendMiner's position with respect to open source? So as you've seen in Nikki's slides, I think many of the technologies that are listed there are open source components. Obviously, we have checks in place to see if the components are okay to use. We need to be conscious of the license, the quality, the security, those kind of things. Now, we typically use third-party components as is, although we have occasionally, I would say, contributed to open source projects as well. And then obviously there is another aspect of open source, which is, are we open sourcing things? We only open sourced a couple of smaller libraries so far, but it's something that we would certainly consider when and where it makes sense. So where you have a good chance of creating a community around that. At Software AG, by the way, the software group that we're part of, open sourcing is let's say more frequent, or is something that is happening. You might be familiar with Cache, for instance. That's a product from Software AG. So I think with that, we've tackled most of the questions. If more questions pop up in the next minutes or so, we will get back to the people that have asked that question offline. And if questions pop up later, or you want to talk to us, well, you can reach out through the contact details on the website, or the ones that were presented earlier in the webinar. So with that, I think we can close the webinar. Thank you all for attending today, and I hope we'll see you back on the next one. Bye.